South Korean President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Donald Trump have spoken over the phone, with Trump sharing the outcome of his recent summit with China's Xi Jinping. Trump also promised to work closely with South Korea and to help maintain regional peace. Starting today, the Korean government is taking applications for the second round of fuel price relief funds, designed to help ease the burden of rising living costs. The cash support will be available to the bottom 70% of income earners. A North Korean women's soccer team has arrived in South Korea to compete in a regional tournament, marking the first visit by North Korean athletes in 8 years. The team will face South Korea's Suwon FC women on Wednesday. President Lee Jae-myung spoke over the phone with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump last night, and the two leaders shared their views on the recent U.S. China summit. Also discussed were peace on the Korean Peninsula and implementing the follow-ups to the Seoul Washington trade agreement. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jang-min has the details.
In a call made after the U.S. China summit, President Lee Jae-myung was briefed by U.S. President Donald Trump on the results of that high-stakes meeting. Their talks over the phone on Sunday night, Korea time, took about half an hour. In a Blue House readout, President Lee congratulated his U.S. counterpart for successfully concluding his first state visit to Beijing in about 9 years. He noted the importance of managing the U.S.-China relationship in a stable manner for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. Trump shared the results of his recent summit with China's Xi Jinping, ranging from Washington-Beijing relations, agreements on the trade front, as well as the situation on the Korean Peninsula and in the Middle East. Lee took note of their dialogue related to the Korean Peninsula, and Trump promised his role and contribution for regional peace and stability in close coordination with his South Korean counterpart. Shortly after the talks, the South Korean president wrote on his social media that they share the understanding that close communication and coordination between Seoul and Washington is more important than ever amid a rapidly changing global order. The two leaders also agreed to faithfully carry out the Allies' joint fact sheet announced last year, once again calling the agreement historic. The fact sheet stipulates Korea's commitment to U.S. investments for lower tariffs and close cooperation on South Korea building a nuclear-powered submarine. On the Middle East, President Lee assessed President Trump's leadership in resolving the issue and wished that peace and stability would be swiftly restored in the region. It was the first top-level interaction between Seoul and Washington since the leaders' meeting in Gyeongju about 7 months ago. Yoon Jang-min, Arirang News.
Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi arrives in South Korea on Tuesday for a 2-day visit that will include summit talks with President Lee Jae-myung in the central city of Andong. Our political correspondent Moon Ye-ryun has more on what to expect.
It will be the third time the two leaders have sat down together, and the agenda is wide-ranging. The meeting is the latest in a series of reciprocal visits the two sides have been building since they first met on the sidelines of last October's APEC summit in Gyeongju, where they agreed to pursue regular high-level diplomacy. According to presidential chief spokesperson Kang Yi-jung, the two leaders are expected to discuss practical cooperation across the economy, social issues, and the protection of their citizens abroad, with regional security and the situation in the Middle East also on the table. Analysts say the summit is less about any single headline agenda and more about sustaining the momentum the two sides have already built.
Rather than being driven by one specific agenda, I think this meeting is about continuing to stabilize the relationship. And within that, issues like energy security and supply chain resilience could come up as areas where the two countries find it relatively easy to cooperate.
The two leaders last met in January when President Lee visited Nara, Prime Minister Takaichi's home prefecture, for the second bilateral summit. President Lee said the two sides agreed to deepen cooperation on economic security, science and technology, and international norms, and to continue working-level talks on artificial intelligence and intellectual property. Perhaps most notably, the two leaders addressed a long-standing historical issue, agreeing to pursue DNA identification of the remains of forcibly mobilized Koreans and Japanese who died in the 1942 Chosei coal mine flooding in Japan, which President Lee called a small but meaningful step forward. But beyond the agenda, much of the attention surrounding Tuesday's summit is on where it's being held. Andong is President Yi's hometown, and as this marks the first time the leaders of the two countries have exchanged visits to each other's hometowns, the Blue House described it as a meaningful opportunity to deepen the bond of trust between them. For Andong, long regarded as the spiritual heartland of Korean traditional culture, the summit also carries local significance, with residents drawing comparisons to Queen Elizabeth II's visit in 1999, which brought a lasting boost in tourism. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, after wrapping up his visit to China, U.S. President Donald Trump appears to be intensifying pressure on Iran in a bid to bring the Middle East conflict to an end. Our Kim Bo-kyung has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump has put further pressure on Iran to come up with a ceasefire proposal that could be accepted. Writing in a Truth Social post on Sunday, Trump said that the clock is ticking for Iran, adding that they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them. Trump reportedly plans to convene his security advisors at the White House on Monday to discuss whether to resume military options as well. In an interview with the online media outlet Axios, Trump repeated that Iran was running out of time and that if it did not bring a better proposal to the negotiating table, the U.S. would attack more forcefully than before. The warnings follow a phone call between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where they reportedly discussed the possibility of resuming attacks on Iran. According to reports citing Iranian state television, the phone call lasted more than 30 minutes and ended shortly before the start of a meeting of Israel's security cabinet. Citing two anonymous Middle Eastern officials, the New York Times said that the U.S. and Israel have entered an intensive state of readiness with renewed attacks in mind. Meanwhile, with Trump voicing impatience at the deadlock, the Korea-built Baraka nuclear plant in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, caught fire on Sunday after being struck by a drone. The fire was on a generator located just outside the nuclear plant and caused no injuries or radiation alerts, with officials saying that all core systems at the nuclear plant are operating normally. The South Korean Foreign Ministry and Korea Electric Power Corporation also said there were no injuries to South Korean workers at the plant. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has called for bipartisan support so that the spirit of May 18 pro-democracy movement is reflected in the preamble of the nation's constitution. Speaking on Monday at the 46th commemoration of the May 18 movement in Gwangju, the president vowed to do his utmost to support the constitutional amendment, adding that the government will never forget the spirit of the movement. Recent parliamentary voting on the constitutional revision led by the ruling Democratic Party has been scuttled following a boycott by the main opposition People Power Party. On May 18, 1980, demonstrations broke out in the southwestern city of Gwangju against then military junta leader Chun Doo-hwan, which resulted in a brutal government crackdown on civilians. And South Korea is launching the second round of applications for its fuel price relief funds, aimed at easing the burden of rising living costs. Millions of eligible residents across the country will be able to apply for cash support beginning today. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The South Korean government will begin accepting second-round applications for its fuel price relief funds starting Monday. According to the Ministry of the Interior and Safety, applications open at 9 a.m. and will continue through July 3rd. About 283,000 people are eligible for the first round, but those who did not apply earlier will also be able to submit applications during this period. The support program targets around 36 million people in the bottom 70% income bracket. Eligibility is based on household health insurance premium payments assessed in March of this year. For example, a single-person household with workplace insurance can qualify if the monthly premiums are 130,000 won, or about $95 or less. That is equivalent to an annual income of roughly 43 million won, or around $31,000. However, so-called high net worth individuals with taxable property assets exceeding 1.2 billion won about 870,000 US dollars, or annual financial income from interest or dividends surpassing 20 million won, or roughly $14,500, are excluded. Special rules were also introduced to ensure dual-income households are not unfairly left out. The amount of support varies by region. Residents in the Seoul metropolitan area will receive 100,000 won, or about $73, while non-metropolitan residents will receive 150,000 won, or around $109. People in designated population decline areas and special support regions will receive up to 250,000 won, or roughly $182. Funds can be received through credit or debit cards, local gift certificates, or prepaid cards. The money must be used by August 31st at small businesses and affiliated stores within the applicant's local government area. Unused balance will expire after the deadline. 이승재, Arirang News.
South Korea released its annual document setting out its policy toward North Korea, highlighting the Lee Jae-myung administration's efforts to seek peaceful coexistence. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Peaceful relations first, before denuclearization or unification on the Korean peninsula. That's the message running through Seoul's new unification white paper, the first under the Lee Jae-myung administration. Released on Monday, the annual document lays out Seoul's policy for peaceful coexistence with North Korea. It appears to respond to Pyongyang's hostile two-states policy, stressing the need to move towards a, quote, peaceful two-state relations geared towards unification.
Since Yi took office, Seoul has suspended and dismantled loudspeaker broadcasts and halted anti-North radio transmissions and leaflet campaigns. Since then, the North stopped sending trash-filled balloons. At least, compared with before, inter-Korean tensions have eased.
The document cites how President Lee last August pledged to respect the North Korean regime, to not pursue unification that subjugates the North, and to not commit any hostile acts. Alongside exchanges and normalization of relations with the North, denuclearization is still a goal under the END initiative. However, the white paper admits the nuclear issue cannot be resolved quickly.
The previous Yoon Suk-yeol government clearly defined the North as an enemy, and its audacious initiative demanded denuclearization first. The Yi administration too seeks denuclearization, but not as a precondition for dialogue. It first aims to lower tensions and seeks dialogue, peaceful coexistence, and shared development.
Without an elaborate focus on unification, the white paper sets out ways to institutionalize peaceful ties, calling to restore inter-Korean contact channels, resume dialogue, and reduce military tensions. It also proposes a new inter-Korean basic agreement as a more durable framework. But experts say a more elaborate approach is needed to engage Pyongyang, which is still refusing contact with Seoul.
With its nuclear arsenal expanding rapidly, denuclearization looks increasingly unrealistic. The priority should be a nuclear freeze, followed by sanctions relief and steps to normalize the North's ties with the U.S. and Japan. Pyongyang must sense real benefits from cooperation with Seoul if it's to return to talks.
The ministry revealed earlier this month that North Korea revised its constitution to reflect its policy of distinguishing South Korea as a separate hostile state, removing symbolic references to unification. However, Seoul officials have noted that the North hasn't significantly sharpened rhetoric against the South. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
North Korean football club Daegoyang FC arrived in the South on Sunday ahead of the Asian Women's Champions League semi-final match against a South Korean opponent. Our culture correspondent Park Gun-woo was at Incheon Airport as the team arrived.
Greeted by the sound of camera shutters at Incheon International Airport on Sunday, North Korean football club Daegoyang FC arrived in South Korea on a flight from Beijing ahead of its AFC Women's Champions League semi-final clash against Suwon FC Women on Wednesday at Suwon Sports Complex. 39 North Koreans, including 27 players and team director Hyun Chol-yun, walked through a crowd of about 100 reporters and security personnel. South Korea's unification ministry approved the delegation's week-long visit through May 24th, the day after the competition's final match, which is also taking place at Suwon Sports Complex. The visit marks the first time that a North Korean sports team has traveled to the South for an international competition since the 2018 International Table Tennis Federation World Tour Grand Finals. On Sunday, civic and religious groups supporting inter-Korean exchange also gathered at the airport to welcome the team.
With the North Korea defectors in our church community, we came here together, hoping to meet the North Korean people. We hope sports exchanges like this can help ease tensions and open a path toward reconciliation between the two Koreas. We also plan to attend Wednesday's match as well.
Despite the warm reception, the North Koreans moved quickly through the terminal without interacting with the groups at the airport to welcome them or responding to questions from reporters. After loading their luggage into the team bus, the delegation immediately departed for its hotel in Suwon. Founded in 2012 and based in Pyongyang, Daegoyang FC is backed by the North Korean consumer goods company Daegoyang and is considered one of the North's top women's football teams, having won multiple domestic league titles. Daegoyang FC from North Korea, now in the south, will now focus on preparing for Wednesday's semifinal against Suwon FC Women of South Korea. All eyes are on which team will advance to the final this Saturday. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
South Korean filmmaker Park Chan-wook has been awarded the Commander of France's Order of Arts and Letters, the country's highest cultural honor. Park received the top rank of the three-tier distinction from the French Ministry of Culture during the 79th edition of the Cannes Film Festival, where he is serving as jury president. He becomes the fourth Korean recipient of the honor, following the late Kim Jong-wook in 2002, conductor and pianist Chung Myung-hoon in 2011, and soprano Cho Soo-mi in 2025. Park made his feature debut in 1992 and is known for movies including Joint Security Area, Old Boy, and Decision to Leave.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. The World Health Organization on Sunday declared an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda a public health emergency of international concern. The outbreak has so far led to at least 80 deaths and more than 300 suspected cases. It is caused by the Bundibugyo strain of the virus, for which there are no approved treatments or vaccines. Ebola spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids. It is rare but severe and frequently fatal. The WHO said international spread has already been documented, with 2 confirmed cases in Uganda's capital, Kampala, from people traveling from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has activated its Emergency Response Center and is sending additional staff to both countries. The WHO advised against border closures, warning they could push movements to unmonitored crossings, and instead called for cross-border screening and immediate isolation of confirmed cases. China has committed to buying at least $17 billion in U.S. agricultural products annually through 2028. The White House announced the commitment in a fact sheet on Sunday, following last week's summit between Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing. The figure does not include separate soybean commitments made in October 2025. U.S. agricultural exports to China fell 65% to just $8.4 billion in 2025, following tit-for-tat tariffs. China will also work with U.S. regulators to resume imports of U.S. beef and poultry. Both countries will establish joint trade and investment boards under a reciprocal tariff reduction framework. Ukraine launched its biggest overnight drone attack on Moscow in over a year on Sunday, killing 4 people. The strikes come after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed retaliation for Russia's devastating strikes on Kyiv last week. Moscow's mayor said air defenses shot down 81 drones since midnight. 12 people were wounded near the city's oil refinery, and a weapons production plant outside Moscow caught fire. Zelensky said the strikes were a direct response to Russia's attacks on Ukrainian cities and were, quote, entirely justified. Russia called it a terrorist attack on civilians. Both sides denied deliberately targeting civilian areas. Bulgaria claimed its first ever Eurovision Song Contest victory on Saturday in Vienna as 27-year-old singer Dara won with her party anthem Banka Ranga. Dara returned home on Sunday to hundreds of cheering fans. Bulgaria's prime minister called it a victory with global resonance. Sofia has said it is ready to host next year's contest, which would coincide with the country's 20th anniversary of joining the European Union. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
The early summer heat continues across the country today, with temperatures once again climbing above 30 degrees Celsius across much of the country. The heat will continue through tomorrow, but conditions will gradually ease afterward, with rain in the forecast in the middle of this week. Under strong high pressure, clear skies and intense sunshine will boost UV rays to very high levels nationwide this afternoon. So during the peak sunshine hours between noon and 3 p.m., it's best to avoid long outdoor activities and use hats or sun protective umbrellas. And this afternoon, Seoul gets up to 30 degrees Celsius. Daegu will be as sizzling as yesterday at 34 degrees Celsius.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.